What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video. Hope you guys are having an absolutely fantastic kick butt day today so far. So guys, today's video we're going to be hopping into the much needed nerfs and buffs in the meta that we're currently in, that hopefully we can see in the next set of balance changes once that update does come around the corner. So we're going to be discussing what an appropriate nerf or buff would be to their character to make them a little bit more balanced in the meta, and I want you guys to comment down below if you agree with my picks, or if I left out one that you believe needs a nerf or buff. Please let me know in the comments down below. I would love to get a discussion going with all of you. So with that being said, everyone, let's get straight away into it. Here we go. Alrighty guys, so we're going to be starting off with the brawlers that I believe need a nerf in the meta. So these are the brawlers that are at a higher standard amongst all the other brawlers. The brawlers that can play on multiple different game modes and play in those game modes successfully. Now with that being said, I do want to say that I believe the meta that we're currently in is genuinely pretty dang balanced compared to some of the metas that we've been in before. We don't have crazy outliers like a Leon in the last meta where they take over the entire meta. Every single game mode they're crazy good, and we don't necessarily have anyone that's genuinely super bad. Normally the brawlers that aren't super good in the meta right now are just really game mode specific. They can play on a certain game mode, but it's only like one of them. So moving on to the nerfs, and the brawler that I believe needs the nerf the most is most definitely Darryl. I feel like Darryl's probably the best brawler in the meta right now just because he plays on every single game mode and he's super good. And it's funny to say that, and it's really makes me happy to say that actually, because last meta Darryl wasn't even close to where he was right now in the meta, probably bottom tier. So seeing that progression, being that people were really confused on how to play him, he was very underwhelming, to where he's at now is really cool. It's a switch of the meta that's really refreshing. However, one thing that changed with this character that I believe made him really good in the meta, especially at higher trophy ranges, is the percent reduced damage that his star power does now. It once was 30%, now it's 40%, which is a crazy amount. As you all know, a few balance changes ago, he got a total rework to his entire brawler. He gets his super really easily. He got it reduced to his health, so he's kind of like a mid-range tank assassin type brawler, which is really cool, and I like that type of brawler in the meta. However, where we're starting to see the problem is that percent reduced damage. 40% is a lot. If you guys think about it in a different way, if you add that 40% to his maximum health, 5,800, he has roughly 7,840 health, which is comparable to some of the highest health tanks in the game, like a Frank and a Primo. On top of that, some of his mechanics are way better than them. He has a lot of mobility, being able to get in close and deal that crazy damage that he does, as well as escape. So with that reduced damage on top of the mechanics that he already has right now, makes him a very threatening brawler, and I believe the most appropriate nerf would be to his star power. I think his brawler is fine right now without a star power, because without a star power it makes people second guess to actually roll in and try to pick up those kills, while if you do have a star power, it's kind of like a free pass. You just roll in and you get that person, especially if you're just rolling into one other person. You can get him pretty dang easily. So I think it'd be best if we would take away that 40%, maybe make it 30% reduced damage with his star power. Overall, his character is fine in my opinion. Moving on to the next nerf, and that is with my boy Spike. And it's funny for me to say that because I really enjoy playing with Spike. He's one of my favorite brawlers in the entire game. However, I feel like he should be knocked down a peg or two. If you observe the last couple of metas, he's been top 3, top 4 for all of those metas, and he hasn't gotten touched in a very long time. And I think the reason because of that is because the spotlight is being taken away from him somewhat because of the crazy good brawlers that have been in the game for the last couple of metas, like the Leon in the last meta, or Darryl now, where they're a blaring need for a nerf, and Spike kind of hides under that shadow of that much needed nerf to those brawlers. But yeah, I feel like Spike has been getting away with being the second best brawler in the entire game for far too long. I'd like to see a damage reduction so we can start seeing different support brawlers being played. Maybe sometimes in gem grab seeing like a Piper, or more often like a Penny in lane. I would love to see that. So the next nerf that I'd like to see is on Leon. That's probably going to be surprising to a lot of you guys just because he's gotten nerfed 2 times since he's been released inside the game, which is crazy, and he's still really good in the meta. As you guys know, I don't necessarily love to play up against Leon because he has a defining characteristic, and that is he's able to make really swingy plays. For example, if the enemy team has 8 gems, they've collected it, they controlled the entire game, they played stellar against your team with you being Leon. However, all you have to do is go invisible, take out their gem carrier, grab the gems, and run away for that big swing, where it doesn't necessarily matter how you play control wise as a team. The only thing that really mattered in that game is that you went invisible and took out that gem carrier and took out the gems. Now granted, that is the type of brawler that he is. He's an assassination brawler. He makes plays that are like that. However, I feel like with that characteristic, you need to be really, really careful so that people don't get a little bit discouraged from playing against a certain brawler like Leon. So yeah, I'd really like to see a reduced damage nerf to Leon. I feel like that'd be really appropriate. If you take a look at his character, he has a lot of essential things that makes him a good brawler inside Brawl Stars. He's got mobility, he's got poke damage potential, he's got that really long range. He doesn't do a lot of damage at that maximum range, but it's enough to keep them from healing up, which is a really, really good element inside of Brawl Stars, as well as an invisibility mechanic, which is very, very broken, and that crazy, crazy bursty damage when you're right on top of someone that can rip through any of the medium range tanks. Once you start getting to the higher health tanks like the Primos and the Franks, then it's hard to get the 3-round burst kill like he could in the last meta, but I still think it's very overwhelming in the meta. I'd like to see something change to Leon again. And the final nerf is to our thick queen, Pam. Guys, I feel like Pam is super, super good in the meta, and I feel like she's kind of overlooked in the meta. I'd say she's third best in the entire game, just because she has so many different roles in the game, where once she was basically just a gem carrier on gem grab, but now we're seeing her on heist, brawl ball, all these different maps and game modes that she's dominant in. And I'd like to see a different gem carrier kind of thrive and flourish in the meta like that. Maybe a Poco being played on heist for that healing potential, or maybe a Jessie being played on different game modes, which we're starting to see now. But I'd like to see someone kind of take her role as that dominant gem carrier in the meta. I think she's been good for now 2 metas, or 2 balance changes. I'd say a health reduction would be really, really good for Pam. I think that's what made her incredibly good, was like a 400 health increase in one set of balance change, and we saw her just shoot up in the meta. Such a good brawler after that. So I'd say maybe a health reduction to kind of level her out a bit. So the very first buff that I'd love to see inside this game is to a brawler that desperately, desperately deserves it, and that is Crow, guys. Crow has been mid-tier, close to bottom tier for a very, very long time, and he's a legendary brawler. Guys, if you take a look at his counterparts, Spike and Leon at the top of the leaderboard, killing it in the meta, and you have poor old Crow at the bottom of the meta, not doing too much. He's good in certain game modes, he can play in certain game modes, but he's kind of an underwhelming pick in those game modes. I feel like he doesn't really have a role in the meta right now. You could play him on Showdown, he's pretty good for that chip damage, but I remember way back when he was actually good in the meta. He could be like a gem carrier. He's super, super good in heist. You could play him in Brawl Ball sometimes. In Bounty, he was crazy, crazy good. But now in those game modes, you're going to want to pick a different brawler other than him to fit his roles. I think a really, really good buff for Crow, and I've been preaching this for the longest time, is an increase to his super regeneration rate. The amount of damage that he does make his super go a little bit faster, because he relies on that super a lot. He's kind of like a Leon, or I would say maybe like a Darryl, those assassination type brawlers. He fits in that category of an assassination brawler, where he needs his super to jump in because he has very, very low health, and he needs that super to get away in certain circumstances. Where in his prime, where I'm going to be bringing this up a lot because he used to be top 3 when this game wasn't global yet, he was really, really good at going in. He had 2 different ways to attack. He could go in just with his mobility, deal a bunch of damage, and then use his super to get away before someone could kill him, or he could just jump in with his super to get a vulnerable target like a Piper in Bounty or something like that, where right now you're probably going to be getting your super maybe 3 times a game, which isn't a whole lot. You can make plays with that super, but if you take a look at his counterparts or assassination type brawler counterparts like a Darryl, where he can get his super multiple times a game, like 10 different times. So I think he needs a buff to super regeneration rate. I think that would help him out a lot. The next brawler that I would love to see get a buff is Piper, guys. I really, really want to see Piper being played on different game modes other than Bounty. It's really, really exciting to see a Piper in Gem Grab as the gem carrier, even if I'm playing against them and they're incredibly good and they're killing us. I am just in love with that because we don't see Piper on any other game modes. Just recently, sometimes on certain team comps, I've seen on Twitter, sometimes people will be running Piper on certain heist maps, some of the longer range heist maps, but that's the extent of her character. She's incredibly good on Bounty, super, super good on Bounty, but you can't play her very well on any other game mode, and I would love to see her being like a support role in Gem Grab, or maybe for Brawl Ball, being that crazy, crazy damage output from a distance. I would really, really enjoy that. Wouldn't you guys? That big of a change to the meta. We've never seen Piper good in this game on different game modes other than Bounty. Besides her first introduction to the game. When she first was introduced to the game, she was crazy good, but now not so good. The next brawler that I would love to see get a buff inside of this game is none other than the newest brawler inside of Brawl Stars, Gene, guys. I feel like Gene is a little bit underwhelming to play with. It might be because he's a newer brawler and we don't have our footing around him just yet where he's supposed to be played in the meta, but I still feel that he's a little bit underwhelming with the amount of time that I've gotten to play with him. I think Gene has potential. He's got really cool mechanics where he has that potential chip damage, and he has decent just damage output when they're close enough. However, where I think the problem lies is his super. It's way too hard to land your super. There is nothing worse than seeing that hand just fly right by the target that you wanted to grab. And on top of that, it takes a really long time to actually charge up your super. When you take a look at different rarities inside of the game, they have a defining characteristic that makes them unique the higher rarity you go. If you take a look at the beginner brawlers that you unlock on your trophy road, they're very basic brawlers. They don't really have anything that makes them somewhat of a higher skill cap brawler, which you see once you go a little bit higher in rarity. Where Gene, that actual characteristic comes from his hand, as well as that weird poke damage with his basic attack. So I feel like what makes him that mythic is a very underwhelming mechanic with that super. If you can only get it like 3 or 4 times a game, as well as if it's very difficult to land, I feel like it's not very worth it. When I first saw his mechanics, I thought he'd be better suited as a epic brawler. I mean, if you compare him to Tara, they basically play somewhat of the same roles inside of the game. Tara is that long range, somewhat chip damage. You could play her like that, as well as she has that crazy burst damage, or she does decent damage when you're up close, much like Gene. Not to the extent of Gene, where Gene actually does like way less damage, but at a further range, and he can get that chip damage rolling. However, Tara kind of plays the same way. And then if you compare the supers, Tara's super is very forgiving compared to Gene, where it's very unforgiving. It's very hard to miss with Tara, with the radius that she has with her super, as well as she can suck in more than one brawler, and on top of that, her basic attack complements her super with the piercing damage if you do get more than one person. So Gene doesn't have piercing damage, he can only pull in one brawler. It's more difficult to use than Tara, and the only thing that's really riding for him is that longer range chip damage that Tara doesn't necessarily have, not as long of range. So I think an appropriate buff would be to his super. It's either you have to make it a little bit more easier to land, or you have to give the person more opportunities to land that super, i.e. a faster super regeneration rate, getting your super maybe like 5 or 6 times a game so you actually can make plays with it. And the final buff that I would love to see in this next set of balance changes, and it's a little bit more of a selfish pick on my end, and that is to Bo. I want to see something happen to Bo. I want him to be really good in the meta. He's been down at the bottom of the barrel for a very long time. Granted, he did just get a buff in the last set of balance changes to his attack, as well as a reduction to his star power, but that made him a little bit more towards the middle of the pack right now. But I want to see him have that big surgence like Pam did in the last couple balance changes, where she wasn't super good in the meta either, but now she's top 3. I want to see Bo being that #1 gem carrier in the game. I really want to, because his mechanics are so fun to play with, as well as to play against. It opens up a different thing that you're playing up against. You have to remember where the mines are, and you have to be able to dodge his 3 shots, which is a lot different than any other brawler. I think his mechanics are just really fun to play with, and I'd love to see him a little bit more in the meta. Alrighty guys, so those are all the buffs and nerfs that I would love to see in this next set of balance changes. If the list was identical to this one that you're seeing in the video today, I would be off the wall, super happy, excited to play in the meta that we would have. It'd be so much fun. A lot of changes, a lot of differences. We're not seeing crazy good brawlers that we've been seeing for a very long time, like the Spikes and Leons. I think it'd be really fun and refreshing. Let me know what you guys think of my picks, if you would change anything. I know some of the picks might have been a little bit controversial, but it's just the way that I'm feeling about the meta right now. But I would love to hear your opinion. Once again, I would love to have a discussion, open it up. I would really appreciate that. So guys, if you did enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like on it. Also consider hitting that subscribe button down below and being a part of the Rowdy fam. I'd also really appreciate that. So guys, with that being said, make sure to keep having fun with Brawl Stars, and we'll see you in the next video. Peace out, guys.